Other question? Any question, please? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. This question is a bit belated one, you see, because Hajj has already finished now. I should have asked
maybe
this.
For the next year it will
in fact, that's why I think maybe I will be going back. That will be very good for me. Now, I want Hazur's clarification. I know I have read it, but not from Hazur's mouth, you see, this one I want. That how the women, is going to Hajj if she is not accompanied by her husband or by her father or some other muhram. Can she go with her own friend's husband or some other people, you see, which I think she should not go because all others are ghair muhram. I want your clarification.
You better write about it to to Secretary Majlis Iftar Rabwa. He will make research into the question. This is a question of jurisprudence. Once the ihram begins, then there is no problem in fact. Because even parda is not necessary during those times. They have very special air of sacredness. And it's a totally different atmosphere, or should be at least. So that is all right. During that period, everybody is in a different mood altogether. But from some other country to that place, that is the distance which you should keep in mind. Now you should also keep in mind that according to the changed times and the difference in the communication system and everything, ladies are permitted to travel alone, while not even a sister or a friend is with them. So when, for instance, ladies travel alone long distances, 12,000 miles or so by air, and no harm is considered about that, why should the objection be raised only when they are traveling towards Hajj? That is the main thing to be decided. So either you should stop ladies from traveling alone in ordinary life. So why poor Hajj should be singled out for this purpose? So this is my general answer, but let them make a research and give you a definite answer. Please.
Zul, I have a question, and it is that when one dies and the soul leaves the body, does it actually get to a point where it meets Allah, or is it kept waiting until the Day of Judgment?
You know, meeting Allah is something which is generally erroneously visualized by us, because there is so much difference between the nature of God and the nature of everything else. Laisa kamithlihi shay'un. There is nothing like Him. The Creator and the creation belong as if to do different worlds. So when you talk of meeting, you always consider meeting in the normal human values.
But in that case, where does the...
I'm coming to that. Now, meeting Allah, even in this world, is witnessed differently by various people at various stages of spiritual development. For some, meeting Allah is just maybe by dreams. They are shown some dream, and that dream comes true, or some important moments appear in one's life where they are deeply moved by love of Allah and so on. So this is the ordinary experience. But meeting Allah is different with, for instance, in case of prophets who begin to live with Allah all along, and they remain in His presence. So they have already met Him. Yet they do not see Him like you see other things, They do not touch him like you touch other things. Allah is not a palpable quantity. So the difference between this meeting and that meeting is immense, isn't it? If you proceed in the same direction and gain further consciousness, and the people of the low stages are lifted to a higher stage and begin to live constantly in the presence of Allah after their death, and the prophets are promoted to still higher stage, comparatively that would be a meeting, won't it? As compared to the earlier stage, many more steps will have been taken in the direction of closeness to Allah. That is a consciousness which is made much clearer than before. For instance, sometimes you see very clear dreams, so clear that you feel that it is the daytime, and sometimes from dream you wake up in dream, and then you find that, oh, now it is day, previously it was dream.
Yes, but
And when you wake up again, then you see the difference.
in that case, there's two types.
Get up and then tell us.
There are two
Why are
types.
you getting up like old people
I can't help
with knee
it.
troubles? Huh?
Lack of exercise.
Take exercise.
Yes.
So you better come and have exercise here, personally.
Inshallah, any moment now.
Yes, please.
There's two types of dreams. One which comes from the shaitan, one which comes from Allah.
Both have the same quality of dreaminess about them.
Yes, but the shaitan, he promises people with dreams of a better way of life.
No, what I mean to say is I'm talking of a different thing altogether.
Yes, I understand your point. I'm just
Here I agree that the dreams shown by Allah have a very special quality about them. There is no gainsaying that. But still, as far as the dreams go, they are dreams. And the dreams of Satan can be of very disturbing nature and very murky quality, dark and full of, confusion and things. Yet they are dreams. So waking up from a dream is a phenomenon common to both. When you wake up from a godly dream, still you realize suddenly that that was dream and now it is not dream. And suppose you are given a higher consciousness suddenly by Allah, and you wake up to realize that was a dream, your life on earth, and now you have come to believe, to see things. That can happen or can't it? The different steps in consciousness are so obviously observed by us in the stages known to us as previous to mankind. Every animal stands at a different consciousness. If suddenly an animal is promoted in consciousness to the higher stage, he would think that the previous consciousness was just a dream. Like some people who wake up to the realities of life, like Neil Dudd did once, they begin to see things in the same measures. Once he said, "Why nadani ke waqte marg ye sabit hua, ख्वाब था जो कुछ के देखा, जो सुना अफसाना था." That, oh, woe to us, that only at the time of death we came to realize that it was only a dream that we had seen, not a real life that we had passed. It was just a tale we have gone through. So that is what he means by various levels of consciousness, but what I mean by various levels of consciousness. In his terminology, a Sufi who begins to travel towards Allah, at the end suddenly realizes that all his past life has been a dream. So when you talk of meeting Allah after death, everyone would meet him differently, because everyone would be at a different stage of consciousness. Meeting Allah as applied to the prophets is a completely different phenomenon of intensity. And meeting Allah by an ordinary person is a completely different phenomenon, again in intensity, of a lowest order. And some people would rise up blind. They could neither see him here, nor would be able to see him there, as the Holy Quran tells us. So this is a lot of, darkness, and unfortunately, period of complete despondency for them. This is why it's important for people to act righteously here, because as I explained earlier, the life here has been explained by the Holy Quran with an analogy of that of the childbirth in the uterus. And it says that you are here like a child is being born in the process of being developed in the uterus. And so will you rise again. Now what is important about it, there are so many things, but one of the things which I want to point out is this, that in the uterus what you lack to gain, after birth you never gain that. For instance, if you are born blind, that blindness cannot be cured. If you are born with some disability, that is called congenital disability. And every doctor would immediately say, no, nothing doing. So this is the difficulty about certain people, those who are totally blind to the realities of God, hard-hearted people. According to the Holy Quran, they will rise up as blind. They will be born blind in the next world. They are the most unfortunate people. So the sinners, ordinary sinners, have some moments of goodness. So they may be likened to a boy or a born baby who is born with defective capabilities. So they can develop, of course. But a person who is deprived of certain gifts at the childbirth, that person is the most unfortunate person. So that is important. Such people will not gain consciousness. I am not talking about those. They are exceptions. And about them, it is said elsewhere in the Holy Quran that they will not be returned to Allah. While in essence everyone will be returned to Allah. So that verse has been always a verse of complexity and enigma for many people. That at other places the Holy Quran says, everyone will be returned to Allah. And in this particular verse about some people, Allah Ta'ala tells us that they will not be returned to Allah. That means they will be without capabilities to feel closer to Allah, even after being given the new life. And in that sense, in essence, they will remain away from Allah. Otherwise, everybody is going to return back to Allah, physically, spiritually. Yes, Dr. Mujib, and then his nephew.
I'm not sure, sir, whether I should ask this question in this forum. Which
so
is
better sit down and be sure about it first.
if I
decide about it.
If I can ask only,
Yes,
a little political flavor in it.
Fine.
Slight political tinge.
Political flavor or political stink? What do you want to say? You're not sure.
Sir, I just wanted to...
Fine?
I think Huzur is aware that last night, the acting chairman of the People's Party, Benazir Bhutto, was on the air on a phone and program.
And I know you gave her a very difficult time by asking the last question and cornering her. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, I didn't
You shouldn't have been unkind to her.
No, sir. Unfortunately, I was not. I couldn't hear the earlier part.
No, I tell you, I heard all about it, but I didn't like the one part about the questions. They were all hitting at her and taunting to her by giving repeated reference to what her father did. Now this is not good, because this, I think, is not morally acceptable to the best Ahmadiyya standards. And I have my authority from Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who prohibited people from teasing Ikrimah bin Abu Jahl by telling him that you are son of Abu Jahl. So when this complaint was lodged to Hazrat Akram Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said no live person should be tortured with a dead person or with the mention of a dead person. That was a beautiful way how he said it. The question was limited and particular, but the answer was very wide and very deep and rich in philosophy. He said, those people who live, they should not be tortured on account of those who are dead. Let the dead be dead and bygone be gone. Huh? So just a moment, I'm coming to it. Now, although the situation there is different, I agree, but the answer which Hazrat Akram gave was a beautiful, independent answer which can be called a lasting, universal truth. So, to ask someone such embarrassing questions which originally pertain to not her or his own past, but to the past of her or his dead father, and mentioning it in so many words and teasing, that can only end up in hatred and shows a sort of revengefulness which is meaningless as far as Ahmadis go. The same questions could have been framed more kindly, and they could have extracted much more reasonable and decent answers. So that is what I didn't like, but otherwise I know the exercise was very, done with perfection as far as the butchery went. Yes.
Sir, I did put a suggestion to her that of course he was a human being and he did err in one way or the other, and she had a chance, if she comes into power, to eradicate and not to go into the same.
She didn't answer that.
I know, sir, but I did.
Why? Because when you bracketed her,
yes, sir,
with her father and made it very prominently clear that her father had committed a folly, then if in that breath, if she accepted your proposition and said, no, I'll rectify this or that, that means she is also condemning her father in the same breath. So you made things very difficult for her. And for Ahmadis as well, in this sense, I don't say that she will come to power. I'm not talking of that. But whatever may happen, if such a person, whoever it be, comes to power, already you have made things difficult for him. So instead of that, you must have enjoyed it thoroughly, and some people must have laughed at how Nazir Bhutto was cornered and how she was flabbergasted and this and that. Okay, let them laugh. But what is the purpose? What is the profit gained by you or Ahmadis? None. In fact, she perhaps wanted to go after Zia because she has trampled political human rights. I mean, apart from what he has done to Ahmadis or tries to do to us even now, politically he is being hated by a large section of Pakistanis. So you didn't give her a chance either to go at him, because when she wanted to, you brought her back to this issue and brought Bhutto to the limelight instead of Zia. While he is already a thing of the past and a pent-up force which doesn't mean anything to us, why to coax people about what he did?
Actually, I'm sorry to say that my question comes now, sir. That many a times.
I'm not sorry, because what I wanted to say, you gave me an occasion to say.
Thank you, sir.
Some people were telling me in the car this morning So they were enjoying the situation. So when I thought coolly about it, my inner reaction was this which I have told you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, but of course you would realize, sir, that my intention was good.
Huh?
My intention was not to tease her as such, but to bring her to her notice what we feel about
It's not murder, it's manslaughter. Yes, go ahead.
The question is, which is posed many a times, and probably, I don't know, I didn't hear from your good self, sir, as yet, the answer, although I tried to explain in my own way. The question is put that why the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, which is a purely religious organization and not a political organization, wholeheartedly took part in the elections during the
Were they not Pakistanis? And how do you say Jamaat Ahmadiyya participated? Did you in England participate in the elections in Pakistan?
No, sir. This is what
Did any Ahmadi living outside, everyone was a member of Jamaat Ahmadiyya, whether he lived in Africa or China or wherever he did. So if Jamaat Ahmadiyya had participated, all Ahmadis should have.
Yes, sir.
But do the religious communities abandon their civic rights? Can they live without their civic rights?
No, sir, they don't.
You are a physician and you attend to your tasks as physician, and also your husband, and also you are a father. So being a physician doesn't deprive you of your rights as a father or a husband or a brother, a sister. So all these are different domains of one's activities. Human animal is a man of vast activities belonging to various sections and fields. So every Ahmadi living in a country is a political inseparable part of that country. So Ahmadis participated in the elections here, and they do always in Africa, other countries as well. So why shouldn't they? And as far as the religion is concerned, Jamaat Ahmadiyya did not make it incumbent as such upon a single Ahmadi to vote for someone. And this is the old practice, no change was made in that. Each district was left to decide for each region after consultation with the local people. And if they did not decide in favor of some parties or some aspirants to the assembly seats, and the majority of that particular region wanted to vote for someone else, they were complete freedom. They had complete freedom. They were fully at liberty to do whatever they please. So this is a misconception on the part of Ahmadis living in other countries, that Jamaat Ahmadiyya decided to vote for People's Party and ordered everybody to vote for People's Party. In Northwest Province, for instance, only in one single seat, Ahmadis voted for People's Party because they had decided. The entire Northwest Province decided to go against People's Party and vote for Muslim League, and they did it. In the Punjab, in Sahiwal district, all the 5 seats were in the 5 constituencies. The Ahmadis living there decided not to vote for People's Party, and they were permitted. Elsewhere in Punjab, the same thing happened. Only the board of experts, which was created, and it is always created by Jamaat Ahmadiyya, to help people to consult, to see what the political situation is and what the political demands are. That board advised them against it. They said, you are going to waste your votes anyway, because according to the assessment of that board, all these 5 seats are going to People's Party anyway. So it's a useless exercise, they advised them. But they said, no, this is the local exigency, and we think we must vote to some other friends or us and so. So they decided, and they were permitted, and they were defeated. and be accepted, defeated in good grace. So this is all a misconception.
So my question is about Qiraat. Qiraat.
How many karat?
Qiraat.
One karat is carat, in fact.
So Qiraat. This Qiraat.
I don't understand that word either. So karat is a carat, 14 karat gold, you know.
Yes, sir.
And
so recitation of Holy Quran.
Qiraat is no word in Arabic. Qiraat is one word that Mustafa Sabit knows. What do you think?
I said, sir.
Qiraat.
I said Qiraat. Maybe my voice is not, I'm not feeling well.
That's beautifully said. Thank you, all right. Go ahead. I was just kidding. Now go ahead.
Thank you. So, I was talking with, I had a long talk with my friend in Pakistan.
That is what has done the trick to your throat.
So, he's a Qari.
Qari?
Yes. And he asked me that there are 17 or 7 authentic styles of recitation of Holy Quran.
Correct.
And he said, he mentioned
17 or 7?
17 or 7, I couldn't remember that.
I said 17 or 7.
Sabah Ashra.
That's right, 17.
Yes,
That's
17.
That's right.
So he said, he mentioned the tradition that the best among you is who learns Quran and then teaches others. So he said the main first learning of Quran is to learn the style of Qiraat. Otherwise, it is not correct to recite by other styles, which are often not learned by others. So this is a question that.
What did you say?
I said that
Yes, come on.
I quoted the example of Hazrat Bilal Habshi Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu, that he was not able to recite like that, but he was liked by Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him. And
he rose to such heights as Hazrat Umar used to stand up when he came.
Yes, sir.
And said, Sayyidna Bilal.
Yes, sir.
So that's the correct answer. Thank you. Sit down.
So he mentioned another thing, sir.
You have said the right answer. Given the right answer to him.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Another question.
All right. Come for another question. Oh, you just look at him. He's waiting most impatiently for a question. You want to ask a question? All right, give him time. Please.
Hazur, Assalamu alaikum. Hazur is not, I had a question in mind, but as the time is short, if Hazur allow me to have a humble request, a sort of suggestion.
Yes, please. What is the first part of that suggestion?
I read the suggestion, Hazur.
Please.
As the UK mission of the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam has been blessed by the visits of 3 caliphs of the promised Messiah and several famous and pious companions of the promised Messiah like Sir Muhammad Zafrullah Khan Sahib, Maulvi Sher Ali Sahib, Chaudhry Fateh Muhammad Syal Sahib, and Maulvi Qudratullah Sahib Sinori. Hazur, I think there is a need of an up-to-date short history of Ahmadiyya Mission UK branch should be compiled, then published for the benefit of Ahmadis all over the world. Hazur, in this respect, as I understand, apart from the material with the headquarters of UK Mission, some useful information is available from the Ahmadi families in the UK, for example, of the late Mr. Aziz Deen Sahib of London.
Thank you so much for this useful suggestion, but you should be pleased to learn that orders to this effect have already been given. Not only that, a separate department has been instituted at Rabwa, which is working for the last year and a half now, about year and a half, and the entire task of that department is to prepare histories of every mission in the world, right from the start till the present time, and have it fully documented and also make it pictorial as far as possible, and give all the necessary data: who visited and who worked, who were the missionaries in charge, in whose time Ahmadiyyat spread, in what manner Ahmadiyyat spread, what persecutions Ahmadiyyat and Ahmadis suffered, and what special signs of Allah they observe, and so on. All these headings have been given to them, that under these headings we should collect data and plus some. So they are already working. Not only the London mission, but the entire missions of the world would be treated alike in this manner. And then we will publish them in beautiful booklets form before 1989 centenary jubilee. And they will be widely distributed in their respective countries and also in other countries. And one central book about all these factors and giving in short histories of various countries would also be published as one single volume of the history of Ahmadiyyat vis-a-vis all the spread in various countries. So I think that would serve your purpose.
At least I did not know that.
Yes, now so many people don't know, but you gave me an occasion to tell others what is being already done, and I receive reports from there what is happening and how the progress is being made. Only a few days ago I received the report from there. Mr. Shaikh has devoted his life for this purpose, and he's doing it quite capably with the grace of Allah.
Is there any time left for a question? Or no?
Of course, yes, of course. You didn't ask a question so far, yes.
No. How much time is allocated? I've got several questions.
3 minutes.
I've got several questions. I can adjust.
You have 4 minutes, all right.
4 minutes. Then I will put the shortest question.
Yes, please.
Would Hazur kindly tell us, shortest, but I can't say with them, not the shortest in importance, but all the questions are important to me, yes, may not be for the public, but I say shortest in length.
In length, yes, that's right. But what about the answer?
But not,
may not be shortest in answer.
That Hazur knows about that.
But you also knew, you told me last time.
I've got some other questions which I thought that require more time,
okay.
And this is regarding a certain movement, and it may not take much time.
Okay.
But for importance, I can't just say that it is less important or more.
That's right.
Would Hazur kindly tell us about the Khaksar movement in India and Pakistan, various stages of their activities, and the present position of their movement?
This is the shortest question he has in his armory. What I know about the Khaksar movement, various stages of its history in India and Pakistan, And also what? And the present position. One Khaksar movement which I know of is exhibited in every Ahmadi letter. When at the end he writes Khaksar.